Hello, everyone. Welcome to another HOSS Talks FOSS. I'm the host, Matt Yankovitz, head of open source strategy at Percona, and I am joined once again by, our old friend from DataStax, Patrick McFadin. Patrick, welcome to another round of my podcast.
Another round. Yeah, here we go. You really got this HOSS does FOSS. Like you got that down. That's amazing, Matt. So I'm pretty
it's
impressed.
A cool
You've gotten
title.
better at this.
Yeah. It's a cool title.
It is a great title.
Yeah. So, that's cool, and we want to, I've been practicing it for, I think we're at like 78 episodes, 80 episodes, something like that. So I've had a lot of time and practice on this now. So that's good.
No, it's got a bit of a rhyme. And, it's like I was kind of bopping my head when you said it. I'm like, it could be like your own rap someday. I'm just thinking,
I think so. We're working up towards the HOSS Talks FOSS rap. Yes.
Just expansion possibilities are endless. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, I'm looking at the merch now. T-shirts.
Right.
Beer cozies. TikTok is the next step for evolution for the HOSS. I'm absolutely positive on it.
You heard it here first.
So, yes. So, Patrick, you are here to chat a little bit about open source, which is what we love to do. We love to talk about open source. We know that DataStax has a brand new offering out there. You have dipped your toe into the streaming space, which is interesting.
We have. Yes. It is very interesting, I think. The thing is that when you're talking about data, there's not just one kind of data. There's lots of kinds of data. And I like to bucket things in the data world as streaming, persistence, and analytics. And, persistence is, you and I have been playing in the persistence world for a long time. Like, store my data and make sure it's still there when I come back. But the streaming aspect is really interesting too, because that's moving data from point A to point B, doing something with that data when it gets there, or as it's moving through the pipeline. Way more interesting. But I think the reason that DataStax is involved in this because they're even more interesting when you combine these things. And that's the real story.
It is interesting because when you talk about like data persistence, right? I've noticed that applications have become way more complicated in that they don't use just a single database. They don't use like a single, service. So sharing data and getting data between multiple persistent data stores, potentially getting data between, different services, different components, all of that leads into this ecosystem that's kind of a Picasso painting, if you will, when you look at architecture diagrams.
Well, and that's the thing that you and I, we also spend a good amount of time over in the data and Kubernetes community. And, I think this is paving the way for a whole new generation of thinking around infrastructure, especially data infrastructure. I don't think we need new things as much as we need to be able to use the things that we have appropriately in better architectures. I do think we're dawning on this age of the architecture first and not like reinventing new products. And we will probably see major, there's always updates that need to be done, but you're right. It's Picasso painting. What if it was more of a little more coherent than that? Like when we're architecting a building, for instance, it has multiple things like a wall and, door, floors, ceilings. There's all these components, but an architect puts them together in a really cohesive way, makes it look nice, but also functional. This building will not fall down. And that, I think that's the shape of data architecture now. That's where we're at this point.
So one of the things that I've been thinking about quite a bit actually is I think we reached this point where we've got so many options in this space, it's confused things a little bit, right? Because, when we talk about like, data persistence, there's, 400 different databases now listed on DB engines. You look at the CNCF landscape, the roadmap, the map that they have, it's like 4 pages now. It's like so large. And there are so many components that do similar things. It's just that, one uses, a REST API, the other one uses its own language, and another one uses something else. And like, it's like the differences tend to be relatively minor. So I'm thinking that we're reaching a point now where either we have to build the tools to help access these seamlessly, or we're going to look at some consolidation in the market, or maybe a little combination of both.
Probably both. And, it's interesting because now we're getting into, like, when you're building out that open data stack, it's not just an open source thing, which is also important, but it's also this open communication. So how we communicate the open standards, because you're right, is what if I want to change a component out? Do I have to rebuild my entire application? Or is it just a matter of I swap this thing out with the same communication protocols, but then it has new features underneath that are different, that give me, like, maybe there's a different way it scales. Maybe there's a like a processing framework that's different, or how it consumes storage, all those things. But I don't have to rewrite my code. That's so critical. Because you know what happens when, we got to rewrite our code. Well, that's a 6-month project or more. And
Yeah.
no one wants to do that.
Yeah, because I mean, once it's actually written and the foundation's laid, it's really difficult to change, the foundation, and then change everything above it as well, right? So it's probably the most costly thing, is that design aspect. If you don't design it in, you don't build the infrastructure up front, there's a lot of cascading impact there.
Yeah, and that's I think that's where I hope that services deployed with Kubernetes or deployed in the cloud using a service in the cloud, these are interchangeable now, because we have these open standards of communication between them. And that's, we were talking about, like, DataStax is doing streaming now, but we're also really strongly supporting Pulsar, Apache Pulsar, which is the underlying technology for our streaming. And so thinking in terms of, like, we want to support the open source side of things, which is, we feel, is a really great project, but we also want to provide it as a service as well. So giving people choice and portability. Yeah. If you're like, we don't want to rent that from you anymore, we just want to go spin up our own, then sure. So, we have to support both of those equally.
Yeah, and I mean, the interesting thing about, like, the modern ecosystem is it's about choices. Not everyone wants to manage their own deployments, and I think more often than not, people are looking for that kind of, like, service infrastructure to make it easy on their development teams.
No, and and there's some things that we were really, I felt like we made some strong architectural choices on our own. Maybe I should talk a little bit about how we got into this.
So why don't we take a step back, and why don't we start there? That's probably a good place to start. So Patrick, let me ask you, what led you to Pulsar?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a funny origin story, Matt.
Whoa, okay. Let's get the popcorn out.
Yeah, let's get the popcorn out. Well, it's from my personal journey of streaming and working with work. I've been working with the messaging systems for a long time. I mean, these are not new in the industry. IBM had MQ series and ActiveMQ. Microsoft, everybody's had these things, and then we made a move towards, like, RabbitMQ is really important. Tibco's huge. Now every cloud service has their own messaging, so this is not a new thing at all.
Right.
And of course, Kafka is the one that's kind of taking all the air out of the room right now. And that was actually when I started doing more open source work with messaging platforms and working with Kafka, I had done some content on O'Reilly about building, like, this Apache based stack of doing Spark, Kafka, Cassandra. I had at the time Mesos.
Yeah, well, yeah,
pour one out for poor Mesos. But it was, that tells you how long ago that was. But at the time, it was, like, clear that, we're building architectures to do this. When I started running into trouble with Kafka, and that was what I was working with it a lot and working with other teams, there's just things that bothered me about it, and they were not getting addressed in the open source community. I was trying to work through that, and it was like we were trying to force something to happen that Kafka just wasn't ready to do. So in 2018, I met the team at a company called Streamlio, which was just a group of people from Yahoo and Twitter that were they were trying to they had this thing called Pulsar. I'd never heard of it, and the thing that struck me immediately was that this was built with a different kind of. It's like the next generation. Like they learned their lessons from the past, and like if Kafka was Hadoop, Pulsar is like Spark. It's like they're like, yeah, that was really great idea, but here's some things to think about at scale. So the thing that impressed me immediately was Pulsar separated out the compute from the storage really cleanly. So each one scales differently. And it was built on this idea of multi-tenancy and having like microservices in place. So you could build out this you could have these horizontal scalars at different layers with full multi-tenancy. That was the first principle for this system. And and this is where we are as an industry, is we don't want to just do one. We want to do 1,000 or have hundreds of thousands of tenants, and a tenant could be a customer. So, if you think of like what that means for the future of infrastructure, it's a must. Now we're talking about cloud native everything. Pulsar was kind of an OG in that regard. It was building out the cloud native version of messaging at the time. And so that was that first thing. And so I just started putting all my energy into working with Pulsar and working with that team quite a bit. And, Jonathan Ellis, co-founder at DataStax, he and I spent a lot of time working with Pulsar folks. And we were both pretty impressed with how it worked. And that's really how that was kind of the origin of how DataStax got involved with Pulsar, because we knew, and here's the best part, the Pulsar integration with Cassandra seemed like such a great win. It was like 1 + 1 = 3, because Cassandra does a lot of things that it can do well. Pulsar does a lot of things that it does well, but when you combine them, they do everything so much better together in a lot of ways. So we can talk about that in a minute. But anyway, that's kind of the big picture of how we got to where we are right now.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because I think this moves us one step closer to, you mentioned like the Cassandra plus Pulsar, it just makes sense. It's like peanut butter and jelly, right? It kind of goes together. I'm seeing more of a shift in people's mentality, especially from the developer spaces. They're looking for that tight integration where they don't have to worry about the compatibility layer and things working together. And so I'm seeing more of an emphasis on, I guess the term that I've heard bantied around a little bit is like, developer data platform or data platforms, where it's more components that are kind of designed and built to work together that solve that kind of multi-data use case, right? You mentioned like you've got the analytics side, you've got the, data storage side, you've got the streaming side, some people might have, additional search requirements, right? So there's all these components that they're specialized individual things for that all talk a little different, but it makes sense when they can come together and work together as seamlessly as possible.
Yeah, it's like buying a device that supports Wi-Fi. That seems like such a basic thing, but if let's say that you bought a phone and it only spoke on LTE and some proprietary Apple network, it's like, no. But if it does Wi-Fi, okay, great. I can integrate it with all kinds of stuff, and I can have a Wi-Fi router in here, and my phone and my thermometer and all these other things are all using that as a transport. So getting the transport right is really important, because then you're not going to have that discussion anymore. You're not really like, well, what should we use as a transport? No, you're just using it. You're not making trade-off discussions, and trade-off discussions are some of the hardest ones to have in an application build cycle or an architecture cycle, because that list on the whiteboard, it's like, well, here's all the things we could use. Here's the pain we have to go through to use them. Or here's the downside of using technology X. Just not having that trade-off conversation is such an accelerator for building applications.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, and I think that's the thing. People are looking for easier to use, faster to deploy, less proprietary knowledge. I don't want to say proprietary knowledge is probably a bad term, but like not having to understand all the details, right? Or have deep knowledge of the solutions that they're deploying.
Yeah. Well, then, so like with Pulsar, and that's where Pulsar, I think, was really appealing, is that they were, that everyone that was involved in the project came with a different point of view, but was willing to work together. So it supports Kafka, for instance. It can speak to the protocol for Kafka, but there's also connectors in there for things like JMS or AMQP, the things that are already out there. So like our streaming product that you can rent from us, if you're on RabbitMQ, you can just move that over and it will work. If you're using like Tibco or JMS or something like that, you can just move that over. So again, it's not like you have to rethink it. It's like using these standard protocols in a way that you already have made the decision to do. The only thing that's different now is you're renting this, or you have something that scales much differently. It deploys in Kubernetes. It has a whole bunch of new features that, again, start eliminating the trade-offs. One trade-off is not, oh, we have to re-architect our application. No, just point it over there. Now you have a completely different scaling system that will work great for you for the next 5 or 10 years that you decide to keep it.
So do you think that, so as we look at like a Pulsar versus a Kafka, or if you're already running that Rabbit, I mean, like obviously the scalability factor is a big play, but are there other potential use cases that are introduced, by switching over to Pulsar?
Well, I mentioned the whole thing around the multi-tenancy, but the other thing that's really interesting is the multi-data center. Again, in the Kubernetes community, this is just becoming a big deal. Is multi-cluster. How do we, instead of just having one cluster that is an island, we may have two. What if we have three? And Pulsar, and I should mention that Pulsar is actually two things. Pulsar is at the top end where the compute is maintained, and then it's another project as Apache Bookkeeper, which is the storage layer. And it's such great names. And the services that run behind the Pulsar head is the bookies. Like people taking book bets. So the bookies manage the replication really well across multiple data centers. So you're already getting this just a completely different DR stance, or maybe you're distributing your data across multiple regions. If you're in one cloud, like Amazon regions, or from two clouds, it's just built in. And it's not something you really have to work hard at. There's a configuration and it works, because a Pulsar cluster actually spans multiple regions, just like a Cassandra cluster spans multiple regions. It's topology that we're talking about. And so it changes the way you do your architecture. You're thinking, oh, I have a Pulsar cluster, and then I have topologies inside of it. And those topologies are, that's when we get into those great discussions about how do we maintain our system, our uptime, our SLAs, that sort of thing. If the East Coast has a hurricane, or if somebody drags an anchor through the internet cable in the Suez
That never
Canal.
happens.
Yeah, how are we gonna be online? Yeah, still there, still good. Real world problems, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that, that scalability and that availability is so critical there. And it's interesting because, a lot of the technologies you mentioned, like the MQ, type of thinking and processing, the message bus has been around for 30 years, right?
More.
Like,
yeah,
exactly. Like it's been around for a while, and it's that modernization effort, right? It's rethinking what we've classically done and putting the modern spin on it. It's about building something from the ground up that has the capabilities to do what modern apps need, which is very cool. And it's great that, as a community, you have people who are passionate about, thinking about, how can we do this better, right? How can we make this, solve the issues that are real today, as opposed to taking your application and having to make it, go back and use the technology that was standard 5, 10, 20 years ago, and potentially limit some of the effectiveness of it. And so that's a really good, powerful thing.
Yeah, and you mentioned that this the different points of view, that is also one of the cool things about Pulsar that I'm impressed by is, it's an Apache project, and Apache really loves the idea of a lot of almost competing interests working together for one software project. It's an innovation churn, because with open source projects, if it's single sourced, a lot of times it can get very monotone. It's like, oh, this is only one point of view. But the Pulsar project is very healthy in that respect, because there's just a lot of different points of view being represented there. Some of them are like big scalers, like Tencent, and there's multiple companies involved in, people who are selling it as a service. So if you think about if you want to deploy Pulsar in Kubernetes, you are well covered. Our Astra streaming is all running on Kubernetes. So of course, things that we are interested in doing and adding feature or adding enhancements or fixing bugs in the project are around running it in Kubernetes, like you probably want to. A good healthy project like that is worth paying attention to, because it is a diversity of thought, which is really important. And it's a really cool part of Pulsar right now.
Yeah, no. And it seems like it has a very vibrant community. It's something that I'm looking forward to, delving a bit deeper into myself, because I think that there's a lot of opportunity, especially in, that, event driven model that everybody's looking to build, and how you stream data from multiple locations is a critical component.
Oh, and the stringing part, that's what's really fun. Some of the new things that are happening right now are like, we brought this to Astra, which is our rental, so I like to call it, is our as a service. But Cassandra has had this CDC, this change data control. So whenever you commit data into the database, you can emit it. Well, now that we combined Pulsar and Cassandra, whenever you set data into a table, you can have it emit to a Pulsar topic. So that's building in all these really neat. Now you have it in this. You're putting the data on the bus. What's the destination? And we've already seen folks putting it into something like Redshift or Snowflake. More of the back end operation, like the data lakes. Where here, I just want to pour data into this thing for analysis later. Great, we can offer that kind of integration.
It's like a live stream ETL in that regard, right? Exactly. It's the extraction and which is cool. It solves a lot of challenges there.
Well, and I'm excited to see what other projects would, when you look at the open source ecosystem, how's that going to enable better ecosystem integration? What's next? Of course, we have Parquet, which is another Apache format from Apache Arrow. That's Spark has their own stream product. Apache Flink. Flink is another Apache project that can, really benefit from this kind of thing. Like Pulsar and Flink are usually used in the same sentence a lot of times. It's a bit of a renaissance in the Apache ecosystem for a lot of these data products that are out there, because it's just solving so many problems still.
Yeah, no, it'll be a really interesting space in the next couple of years to see, which projects, solve which use cases, where they become popular, how the features evolve. It should be fun to watch.
I'm watching it.
Of course you are. Of course you are. Yes. So Patrick, so here's the fun thing. You might not know this because you haven't been on the podcast since episode 7. So it's been a long time. So I have started something recently. Okay. And what I have started recently is Matt's random questions that I have no idea what I'm going to ask. I'm just going to ask random questions to get answers from you and see what kind of answers I get.
This is like a Rorschach test. Okay, I'm ready.
Yes, it totally is. It totally is. Although, Patrick and I were talking ahead of time. We share a awesome love of science fiction books. So we've overlapped on several of them. So, I was going to ask what was the last book that he read. You can say it, but you kind of told me, I guess, this last book you listened to.
Yeah, because who has time to read anymore? We listen to everything, right? So what was the last book that I read? Oh boy, I gotta look and see. It was To Hell and Back, which was the last Omega Force book, I think, or the next to the last.
Yeah. Yes. Good science fiction book there.
Great series
from Joshua.
Recommend it.
Dazelle. Yeah. And he also does the Ember Wars. So in case people are interested in that. So what is your favorite movie, Patrick?
Oh, Blade Runner, by far. Easy. Yeah.
Okay. So did Blade Runner, like the second Blade Runner, destroy the first one?
I really like the second one. I'm in that camp. So sorry. Yeah. And really? I also like Revenge of the Sith. I thought that was one of the best Star Wars movies. So yeah.
Really?
Oh, it was. Wow. That was amazing. But yeah, I thought 2049 was a pretty good movie, only because I think it still told the story in a way that was compelling, and it didn't ruin the first one. I mean, the two movies stood alone in many ways, but it didn't ruin the story. So the first story held up.
Well, I think not to do any spoilers, but it was just the first one left so many open questions. There were so many fan theories, and then they tried to like solve a lot of them in the last one, right? And so I don't know, maybe for me it was like I liked not knowing a bit. Right. And some of the.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Don't tell me what the answer is. I want to imagine it myself. Yeah, that's true. But I mean, you do have two very different, movies that are made by different people with different visions. And I mean, anybody who's going to try to follow up Ridley Scott is.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, definitely. So Patrick, if we're up, we're going to go hang out at a conference in the future, and we're going to go out to dinner. What are you going to order?
Let's see. What am I going to order? If we're conferencing, I try to eat as light as possible because it's really bad. But what am I going to order today? I'm going to order just a small piece of steak. I just love my protein. How about that? Is that good?
Okay, a small steak, like a petite.
A small
like
8 ounce steak.
8 ounce. Okay.
Protein is really important when you're on the road.
Okay.
This is a boring answer. I know. You probably wanted something really good, like
I get people to say that they like noodles, they would sushi, and I'm asking because people are going to meet you at a conference. They're going to be like, oh, let's go to dinner and chat, and then they're going to know what to order you. Is there a Okay,
it's the thing around conferencing. You just tend to eat like crap when you're doing conferences. So I try to be very conscientious about that, because you do want to just let's go eat like the melted cheese thing, or the all-you-can-eat barbecue in Austin, or something like that.
Well, yeah, you almost have to. You're compelled to eat whatever the regional food is, right? Like so it's like
that's a good one.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's just, you mentioned Texas. I was in Texas Open Source Summit, and it's like everyone's like, let's go get barbecue. And like you eat barbecue like 17 times in a row. Right. So I get that. But maybe a more important question is, what kind of drink should people buy you if they're at the bar talking with you, and like, you're talking about Cassandra, Pulsar, DataStax, you're having a good conversation about open source. What's your beverage of choice?
Well, it's going to be beer, and a very dark beer at that. I'm Irish, so Guinness is always a go-to for me if nothing else is available. But I do like variety, so I like to see what a lot of microbrews do with dark, like any dark ale, nitro stouts, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Those are my favorite as well. I mean, I think if I was going to pick one, Black Butte Porter from Deschutes, I like that.
That's
nice.
That's a hearty brew. Yeah, you can put a fork in it and it'll stand up.
That's the way that it's supposed to be, right?
So fun side, Matt. I did a meetup at the Guinness Brewery at St. James Gate, because there's a startup incubator. I did not know this. There's a startup incubator in St. James Gate in Dublin, and I went there and did a talk on, I forget what, probably Cassandra. But I was like, this is the holiest of holy places, and I'm here.
So, fun fact, you might not know this. Did you ever run into the old Ruby conference called Ruby on Ales?
I have heard of it. I never went because I was not a Rails person, but
Okay. Well, so I went. I was actually a speaker a couple years. It was generally in Bend, Oregon, at the Miniman's Brewery, and so it was. You would listen to talks and drink all day. It was a weird experience. It's fun, but Ruby on Rails. I don't know if they've done it since like 2016, 2017. It's been a while. But it was quite the experience. So when you say you did it at a Guinness brewery, I've seen that before. I often wonder, why aren't there more kind of like fusion open source conferences, right? Like, so like some, heavy metal, music or something with some, great, beer and open source talks. Like we need this. I think we need this as a community. We need to do almost like an open source festival vibe.
I am a big fan of that because festivals are what it should be. We're all celebrating, we're out there. It is a good place to get together. I love that idea. The Monktoberfest. Did you ever go to one of the Monktoberfests?
No.
So that's a Red Monk thing. And,
okay.
So that whole crew, very beer centric, and it was in Portland, Maine. And it was like that it was a beer festival it was kind of mixed into a conference. And like, there was an official like beer tasting in the middle of the conference.
This is great though. Why don't we have that? Like, where is this?
Yeah.
We need a festival like this. We need the open source music, beer, and festival, right? The open source music and beer festival. Yeah. Yes. Like
lots of happiness.
That's what we need. Yeah.
What? You're inspiring me. The next conference I have any influence in, I'm going to turn it into a festival, and I'm inviting you.
That is awesome. I will be there. I will speak and drink. I will drink and speak. I won't sing, but you could potentially ask me to sing, I guess, but you wouldn't want to.
I believe
it would ruin the experience.
You remember we talked about the rap thing? This might be.
Well, yeah. I'm better at improv, I think, though. You never know, though. So there you go.
Slamming, like poetry slam. That'd be cool.
Ooh. I've never thought about that, but that's something that I could try, right? So there you go. Patrick, look, you're inspiring me again.
Inspired.
I'm inspired. Yes, that's what we do here is, from a DevRel perspective, we inspire people, right? That's what we're supposed to do is get people interested and inspired. And I think that a, music / open source / beer fest would inspire people. And I don't even know how to like recover from that idea. It's like so great. It's like I can't go anywhere from there. It's like going to be stuck in my head forever.
I would recommend you go back and look at some of the HOSS Festival. Do you remember that? That was Woz when he had all his Apple money and he left Apple. He just decided to do like this computer and music festival. Go look at the HOSS Festival. It was back in the day. I'm kind of old.
Yeah, that's been a while. Like I just Googled it real quick, and
it was really funky. It was really funky.
We like funky, though.
I feel like that's the roots of what you're talking about.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it would be cool. I'm down for it. So, I think this is going to be the foundation for it. We're going to point back to this podcast episode, and in 10 years, we're going to say the world's largest open source music festival started here.
It'll be like South by Southwest, but better.
Yeah, well, South by Southwest is not necessarily an open source conference. It's a music festival. We're an open source conference that happens to have music and beer.
That's what makes it better. So, yes.
Right? It's technical content. It's learning and drinking and partying, and that order potentially. It's going to be awesome. I swear to God.
No commits.
I swear to God. Yes. So, Patrick, last question. What is your favorite open source tool at the moment? Like, what are you using more often than not? What are you really getting into?
What am I using a lot of right now? Well, I mean, I feel like I use VS Code a lot. Is that considered open source? Probably not.
Yeah,
actually,
I don't.
Lens is the other one that I use a lot now too, which is a Kubernetes thing. That's an open source tool, and I believe. Oh my god, am I like burying myself with non-open source stuff? No, VS Code is open, but it's not. It's Microsoft open, and but
well, that's not a bad thing. I mean,
but no, I use Lens quite a bit for managing Kubernetes clusters. It's a pretty cool little tool. Yeah, and my all-time favorite is Pandas. I use a lot of Pandas.
Okay, well there you go. There you go. You could have said anything. There was no right or wrong answer, right? So,
Well, I'm just going through like, if I'm gonna be honest, it's anything that manipulates data. Yeah.
Well, VI can manipulate data. Let's see VI.
Oh, yeah. At least you didn't say Emacs. That's all I gotta say.
Well, there is some Emacs love out there. I'm gonna say that there is.
Well, if you like using an operating system as an editor, that's great.
Hey, to each his own. His own.
Not judging, just saying.
yeah, don't judge. Well, Patrick, thank you for hanging out with me, having some fun here. Chatting a little bit about Pulsar, some of the things that are going on. If you haven't checked out DataStax, go ahead and check out DataStax' new Pulsar offering. Check out their cloud, their as a service offering that provides you with both free. Cassandra.
You can sign up and get it for free. We have a free tier forever, which is actually pretty usable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So please.
Yeah. And, I think, one of the things that I'm really interested in seeing is how people start to potentially use Pulsar to, do almost like that ETL process between multiple databases, right? So, you're going to need the same data in Cassandra and Postgres and Mongo and your Snowflake, right? Whatever you're using, and how do you make sure that it gets to those places? And I think that, technology like Pulsar can really help. So looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Matt.
So Patrick, thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, this has been fun.
I try to make it fun. Yes.
I'll see you at the next festival.
Yes, the next festival. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for hanging out today. And if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Put a comment here. I can always relay something to Patrick. And if you want a open source music festival, let us know, because I think we can hook that up. I'm just envisioning this. I'm thinking of the lineup in my head already. Before we go, is there like a headliner that you would put on that music festival? Like if it was going to be open source and music, who would naturally come as the headlining act?
I think in the spirit of open source, we would just let people do commits into a GitHub repo with their favorite bands, and we would just vote on them. So I'm not going to say.
And then try and get those people there.
Yeah, let's get the crowdsourcing going here. This is not any no one person gets to make that decision. This is like a group. We're going to make this together.
Yeah. So who was it? Oh, now I forget. Was it Megadeth that one of the guitarists actually did a whole open source album? Did you know that?
It wasn't Metallica. We know that.
Well, it wasn't Metallica. Yeah.
It could have been. It could have been. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was something like God. Now it's going to drive me nuts. But there is an open source metal album from someone who lives in the Nordics. So
you need to have that person on. That's all I got to say.
I do, right? Yeah, I do. But Patrick, again, thank you for coming. I appreciate hanging out today, and we will chat with you next time.
Great. See you, Matt.
Wow, what a great episode that was. We really appreciate you coming and checking it out. We hope that you love open source as much as we do. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, tune in to next week's episode. We really appreciate you coming and talking open source with us.